Hello my fellow Hetalians, and boy have I wanted to do a video on these two for a long time. I was going to do a series of fan songs around this topic, and I might still. But right now, I am going to talk about my favorite rivalry in all of Hetalia. Prepare your butts because we are going to talk about one of the most underrated and most interesting rivalries in the whole series. The Crusade duo, Prussia and Lithuania. Now, Kalko, you may be wondering, what's so special about these two? Austria is clearly Prussia's main rival and worst enemy. Is he though? Compared to Austria, the rivalry between these two goes back much farther. Prussia is somewhat friendly towards Austria today and has even cleaned his house for him. And Austria is an incredibly messy person and leaves underwear everywhere. That is not something you would do for an enemy. Austria even feels bad that Prussia has to live under Russia's roof during the GDR. The two fought together in every war in the 20th century, and Prussia freeloads off of him. Well, I guess Austria doesn't really enjoy that much. But Prussia and Lithuania's rivalry is much more intense and is still tense to this day. Even in modern day, they are still antagonizing each other, albeit passive-aggressively. In the Halloween 2013 event, Prussia purposefully forgets Lithuania's name and refuses to say it. Lithuania tells him straight to his face that he doesn't like him, while giving him advice on how to live with Russia. He even openly glares at him. Lithuania, the ultimate doormat, the same person who does this. Lithuania never acts this way towards anyone in the whole series. Not towards Poland, not towards Sweden. Sure, he has a grudge against Russia, but he doesn't openly confront him, probably because he's too scared. But what causes Lithuania to act so out of character? Why do these two hate each other so much? Today I am going to review these two's rivalry, why they hate each other, and delve more into some history, and maybe even produce a theory or two along the way. So let's dive into it. Why do these two hate each other so much? Well, it is actually stated right here. Why are Lithuania and Prussia on bad terms? It's because Lithuania stood firm and refused to convert during the Teutonic Knights' conquest to convert all heretics, and he was forced to compete in wrestling matches and stuff and got his ass handed to him. That's right, Prussia got his ass handed to him by Lithuania during the Baltic Crusades. Since we all know Prussia used to be the Teutonic Knights. Prussia is still bitter about losing after all these centuries. By the way, do you know when the Baltic Crusades were? In the 13th century. The 13th century. That is 800 years of being butthurt. Well, if we include the final battle, the Battle of Grunwald, then it's 600 years of being butthurt, but the War of Austria's succession was a bit over 200 years ago, and the fight over Germany was a little over 100 years ago, and Austria and Prussia get along better than Prussia and Lithuania do. Anyways, Prussia is still bitter about losing to the guy who used to clean America's toilet for a living. Not to mention he was annexed by Lithuania shortly afterwards and forced to become a vassal under Poland and Lithuania. So that's why he's mad. But why is Lithuania mad? If anything, Lithuania seems more angry than Prussia. Shouldn't he be happy he won? Well, let me fill you in on exactly what happened during the Baltic Crusades. Fangirls and fanboys, we are going to delve into some real history, so strap yourselves in and prepare for some story time. It's time for the history behind Hetalia. Now, if you think about it, these two clash in 4 different areas of history. The Teutonic Knights versus the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Kingdom of Prussia versus the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Third Reich versus the Soviet Union, and if you want to stretch, you could say the GDR versus the USSR, assuming that Prussia is being the rebellious little shit that he tends to be, and Lithuania being the pushover for Russia that he is. But that is only a headcanon of mine, so we are going to focus on the other 3 areas. Let us start with World War II and go backwards. Of course, the Soviets sieged and laid waste to Berlin, and they were a huge thorn in the Nazis' side. But during World War II, Lithuania was independent up until 1940, when Russia annexed all of the Baltics because of a bullshit pact called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Since they did not consent to this, many took to the woods to fight the Soviets, some even siding with the Nazis to do so. In short, the Baltics were pretty divided during World War II. They had mass deportations and murders from both the Soviets and the Nazis. So, how do we really know if Lithuania was on Russia's side? Well, take a look at the series. When Latvia says that he wants to live with Germany instead, Lithuania chastises him, saying that it will be worse than living with Russia. So, as split as Lithuania was, I think he would have mostly sided with Mother Russia more on this one, or at least at the end of the war. Being part of the Bloodlands, where they were both oppressed by both the Nazis and the Soviets, he might have not picked a side at all. But there is more to this era of World War II. Many countries in the eastern part of Europe initially saw the Nazis as liberators from the Soviets at first. Hell, some of the Ukrainian villages welcomed them with baskets of bread. But this didn't change the fact that the Nazis still saw the Slavs as subhuman. They had a plan for these nations known as Generalplan Ost, which entailed what they would do with these reconquered, rightfully German lands after the war. It is a really interesting topic to study. This involved exterminating the majority population, Germanizing whomever was left, and resettling the newly emptied land with Germans. This is a chart of how much of the populations they were planning on exterminating or deporting to Siberia. Yeah, the Nazis liked the idea of deporting people to Siberia as well. Small world. Notice how the Lithuanian percentage is much higher than that of the other Baltics. Well, this is because the Nazis believed that the Lithuanians had too much Slavic blood in them, making them, basically Slavic. So according to Himmler, almost the entire nation would have to be deported to Siberia. While Generalplan Ost wasn't really released to the public, it kind of shows what their main mentality was about the Lithuanians. Probably because of the whole Klaipėda thing. But everyone suffered during World War II, and besides, Lithuania probably doesn't act this way towards Germany today, and both Prussia and Germany get along well with the former Allied powers. And also, bosses' decisions do not influence the nation's decisions, even though I think Prussia probably would have bought into the whole anti-Slav propaganda. Anyways, it seems that the World War II drama is behind everyone now. So let's go back even further. Now for the second era. First, let's go over Prussia's side of the grudge, since Lithuania had a lot of wins in this era. The Battle of Grunwald is known in history as the beginning of the decline of the Teutonic Order because before Lithuania defeated them, they were seen as these invincible warriors, and this was a huge blow to their reputation. This just led into a downward spiral for the Teutonic Knights, with numerous defeats. They lost a 2-month Gallic War, the Polish-Teutonic War, the 13 Years' War, and another Polish-Teutonic War. And those are just the conflicts involving Poland and Lithuania. Eventually, the Teutonic Order's territory on the Prussian coast was forced to become a vassal of Poland, forcing Prussia to probably work under Lithuania until 1618 when Brandenburg Prussia was created by the Hohenzollerns and eventually evolved into the Kingdom of Prussia in 1701. Yeah, that is something that one does not easily forget. Now for Lithuania's side. First of all, there was the First Northern War, which the Kingdom of Prussia helped Sweden defeat Poland and Lithuania during the Battle of Warsaw, but these losses were kind of insignificant. Most importantly, guess who took part in all 3 partitions of Poland? Yep, Prussia helped bring down his glorious empire, but so did Sweden. and yet he doesn't react the same way to Sweden. So we have to go back even further to the Baltic Crusades. But before I begin, I need to note something. When I mention the Prussians here, I do not mean our current Prussia. I mean the old Baltic Prussians, for you see, the term Prussia is a historical name of this region here, of which the Kingdom of Prussia took its name from. Baltic Prussia and German Prussia are two totally different nations. I already made a video on it. Anyways, let's continue. Story time! Many years ago, in the early 13th century, new kingdoms were popping up all over Europe. Slowly and surely, the whole continent of Europe was becoming Christian. But there was one area on the continent that remained uncharted, unmapped, and avoided. The area by the Baltic Sea. It wasn't uninhabited. People lived there. But this place was inhabited by pagan tribes. These people were known as the Balts, but they were often just labeled as barbarians, because these weren't your everyday, peaceful, pray to the trees kind of pagans. Oh no. These people were supposedly the loot and raid other villages, murder their inhabitants, and make human sacrifices kind of pagans. As with most evolving nations, they eventually broke into groups, forming their own tribes. Some tribes breaking into more tribes. And the land of Lithuania was first ever recorded in writing when the people there killed a priest. They did not like priests. And so the Teutonic Knights were promised the land there if they could drive out these barbaric pagans. And that's just what they did. One by one, the Teutonic Knights, along with a few other religious orders like the Livonian Order, began to drive out the pagans, giving them the choice of conversion or execution/expulsion. The Baltic Prussians put up quite a fight, but were eventually quashed in the Great Prussian Uprising. Many tribes went extinct because of these crusades, but in 1236, the Grand Duke Mindaugas united all the surviving tribes to form one nation to stand up to the Crusaders. This was the official formation of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. In that very same year, the Pope officially launched a crusade against Lithuania, bringing never-ending fighting to the region until 1410, when the Teutonic Knights were finally defeated in the Battle of Grunwald. Let's analyze the history for a bit. An official crusade was launched the same year after Lithuania was just founded as a country. So for Lithuania, it was basically, hey, welcome to being a country. By the way, a bunch of people are trying to kill you. Have fun! So Prussia was basically this childhood bully that would pester him, throw things at him, shoot arrows at him, and worse for about 200 years. And yet, Lithuania was the one pagan that Prussia couldn't forcefully convert. The one that got away. And then converted to Catholicism anyways, because Poland. See, all you had to do was ask nicely. Oh yeah, and speaking of the others, time for the theory portion of my video. Before I get into this theory part of my video, I want to touch on something. While I was recording this video, there is something else that I noticed, and that is Lithuania's age. So Lithuania was born in 1236, and before you say, "Wow, he's older," take a look at episode 40 of World Series. In this episode, he is constantly referred to as a new nation, even tells us that he is a new country, and Hungary has to teach him about his neighbors. He doesn't even know who Turkey is. And looking at the map at the beginning of the episode, this event takes place in 1248 or 1249, because if it were later, Lithuania's map would look like this. Even though the Ottoman Empire and Wallachia aren't called that until much later, if this was any later than 1250, Lithuania would not be facing the Baltic Sea like he claims. So it's pretty clear that he is a brand new nation. Anyways, in this scene, Hungary should be around her 350s, if not older. If 1236 is indeed Lithuania's birth year, guess how old he is in this scene? Well, Lithuania is only 12, in this scene. Not physically, actually. I can buy cheese in the market that is older than Lit in this scene. And he's still physically older than Iceland when he was first founded. He looks older than Austria in the year 1000, and he's only 24 in this scene. And yet, he's making arrows and fighting crusades at this age. Not to mention he has an impossible attention span for a boy that age. And if you think that's weird, it gets weirder. If he was really born in 1236, then how is he so old by the time he unifies with Poland? The union happened in 1386, so he should only be in his 150s, and yet, when he talks to Hungary in this scene, she is around 350 years old, and she is at war with Turkey. To compare, in 1655, this happens and England meets America. And he's pretty much the same age as Lithuania 120 years later due to self-sustainability. When he fights Hessen, he is at his youngest in his 130s. America is known for his rapid development, which means the same thing must have happened to Lithuania. We all know why America aged so fast, but what made Lithuania age so fast? Well, I think you know the answer. Yeah, that means that Prussia bullied Lithuania into aging. This is a whole new level of bullying. Lithuania didn't really get to have a childhood. He was born into a war, and that's how it was for his entire childhood. I mean, take a look at everyone else when they are around this age, or actually a lot older than this age. They are still acting like children, like England running away from his king, trying not to cut his hair, and France thinking that England has been swallowed up by a caterpillar. They're still clearly kids, and still in their hundreds. Lithuania, we don't see him act like this, ever. Lithuania never got the chance to really be a kid, because as soon as he was born, he had to fight the Crusades. Lithuania didn't really have a childhood because of Prussia, which is why it is said that he is even more serious than Germany. Okay, now for the theory part of my video. Remember how I talked about all the other Baltic tribes? Anyways, they all had their own languages and cultures, kind of like Germany's brothers. Actually, Lithuania was created in a similar way that Germany was, with a bunch of tiny nations or tribes, in this case, uniting together. Here is my theory. What if all these tribes were Lithuania's siblings? That's right, time for the theory that I have been sitting on for almost a year. The theory of Lithuania's siblings. As you may expect, all of these groups, except for the Middle Balts, so Lithuania and Latgalia. Also, these Latgalians are not the same as these Latgalians that still exist today. Okay, got it? Okay, good. Saved myself a comment war there. Are extinct today. So what happened to the other nations? Well, I think you can guess. The Teutonic Knights was trying to convert everyone to Christianity. So that meant convert or die, pagan. The people living in Baltic Prussia and other places assimilated with the Germans were killed or fled and assimilated with other cultures, thus wiping out their identities, languages, cultures, and with it, their nations. In the end, the only ones that survived were the Lithuanians and what would later become the Latvians, but those people converted to Christianity because they were smart. But in the end, this would mean that Prussia killed pretty much all of Lithuania's siblings, and now he's pretty much the only survivor. He was the bandit King Bakura to Prussia's Akhenaten. He may have gave Prussia what he deserved at Grunwald, but the years of bullying, the loss of his childhood, and possibly the loss of all his family members gives Lithuania more than enough justification to hold a grudge against Prussia today. So the moral of the story is don't pick on the weird illiterate pagan kid in the neighborhood, because they just might kick your ass later on in life. And that was 1 mark higher on your history test. Thank you for watching Hetafacts.